What's going on YouTube? Stefan here from App Stuff. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are doing better than I am because I actually have COVID right now and it sucks. But I figured what better time than now than to make you guys an awesome YouTube video while I'm stuck at home, bored out of my mind. So with that being said, let's go over this awesome feature that we're going to be building here today. So we have this Uber Eats style menu, and you guys can see here that we have this scrollable list of categories up at the top. It's horizontally scrollable. And you notice if I click on one of them, it scrolls to the position of that category in the menu automatically. So this is like just a typical like menu that you will see, and you guys will notice that as I scroll the menu and I get to a particular category, it also selects that category for me up in that horizontally scrollable list as well. So we have some like sort of dual functionality there, and it's really cool. And we're gonna go ahead and get started with this soon. Quick shout out to Kavsoft. They inspired this video for me. I just added, some of my own spin to it and improved upon it a little bit. And obviously with my channel, you get a video explanation of the entire feature, whereas with theirs, you don't. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get started with the Xcode project. So let's go ahead and select app, hit next. I'm gonna call this SwiftUI Uber Eats menu. Hit next, hit create. Okay, oops, let me get my app open back up. Okay, so I want to start from the top down really, guys. So we're going to create this little sort of menu bar up at the top here, and then we're going to work our way down to this, and then we're going to create all this fancy stuff down here, and then we'll add all the functionality. So first thing I want to do is create a VStack. And the reason I'm creating a VStack, guys, is because we're going to stack this and this in a vertical stack. So this on top of this. And this is going to be contained within an H stack. So I'm going to say H stack, and it's going to have spacing of 16. And then I'm going to create a button with an action and a label. No action for now. Our label is just going to be image system name. And really quickly, let me actually go ahead and just get this preview going. iPhone 11 Pro, resume. So it's going to be image system name, and it's going to be arrow.left. It's going to be .font .title 2. Okay, so that's going to get it to that nice font size right there. Let's go ahead and just try to get our preview going so that we can see this stuff building out live as we go. It's going to save us a lot of time. Then what I'm going to do is go here and create this text. It's just going to say like Miami, South Beach, and obviously you guys could replace that with whatever you want. It's going to have font of .title 3, .font weight, .semi-bold, .frame, and we are actually not going to give that a frame. Sorry guys. And then we're going to create another button. So we can literally just copy this here, and this is going to be our search button. Okay, so we're going to replace arrow.left with magnifying glass, just like that. And what we can do to spread this all out, guys, is you guys notice how this is kind of close together, but this is sort of stretched out, or there's space in between here. Let's just go ahead and add a spacer next to Miami Beach. And you see how it's going to spread everything out nicely like that. And then on this H stack, we're just going to add a padding of .horizontal. So that's looking pretty good. And then we're going to say .foreground color is .black. All right, so that's looking pretty good. The next thing we have to tackle is this scrollable menu options list that we see here. And this is pretty complex, so let's go ahead and jump into it. First thing we're going to do is create our data model for this, guys. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and it's just going to be a Swift file, and we're going to call this menu bar options. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste this in here and go over this enum with you guys and how it works. So basically, we are creating an enumeration to help us create each one of these different menu options, right? You guys can see here pretty clearly that we have a case for in our enum for each one of these menu options here: Japanese, American, Italian, promotions, and fancy. And then we have this title property, And that's just going to give us back the actual title that we want for each one of those menu options, right? You could make this anything, right? You could make this like Japanese cuisine or something like that, and that's what would show up there. But essentially this title just helps us get back the string that we need for each one of those menu options. And we're going to see why we conform to this case iterable protocol here in just a second. So let's go back to our content view. We are going to put this right here, menu options list. That still goes within this VStack. I'm actually going to create a separate file for that, just because I don't like to sort of crowd up the content view with too much code. And this is a pretty complex view, so we're going to create a separate file for that. So we're going to create a SwiftUI view. And let's see, what are we going to call it? We're going to call it menu options list. So menu options list. And first things first, guys, it's going to be a scroll view. And it's going to be a horizontal scroll view. And we're going to say shows indicators is false. Okay, so that's looking good. And we are going to have an H stack here. Spacing is going to be 30. And we're going to say for each, and this is where that case iterable protocol comes in on the enum. So because we conform to that, it allows us to treat all those enum cases as an array, which allows us to do a for each loop on it. So we can say menu bar options dot all cases. We have to use our ID here for the for loop, \self. And then we are going to do an open bracket, say item in, and hit enter there. So now we have access to each item in this menu bar options enum. So right now, guys, I'm just going to add a text, and it's going to say item.title, and I'm going to hit resume on my preview just to make sure that it's showing up. And let's hit play, and we can see here that it's this nice scrollable list, and it's looking pretty good, right? Okay. That's not all though. We need this like selector, and we also notice that the selected option is a different text color than the rest of them. So let's go ahead and give this a foreground color. We're going to say foreground color, and let's just go ahead and add a property up at the top, right? We're going to have a binding variable called selected option, and it's going to be a menu bar option. So we're going to see why we made it binding in a little bit, but basically this is just going to help us keep track of which option has been selected. So currently it's American. If I click Japanese, the selected option is Japanese, and based on whether or not we have that selected option, that's we're going to change the color and show this underlined selector here. In our preview, let's go ahead and fix this. We need to say selected option constant, and then say like Japanese or something. Okay, so we're going to say .foreground color, and we're going to say item equals selected option, yes, .black, oops, no, .gray. Yep. Okay, and now let's see, is that working? Ooh, no, I don't want two foreground colors. So let me build that. That should be working now. Cool. Okay, so now what I need is this this guy right here, the selector. So inside of this for each loop, guys, I'm actually going to need to wrap this inside of a VStack. So you guys could command click on the for each loop and hit embed in VStack. And that just automatically wraps it in a VStack for you. And the reason it's a VStack is because we're vertically stacking these things. So now we're going to say if selected option equals item, we're going to create a capsule, and it's going to have a fill of .black, and we're actually going to give it a frame of height, which is 3, and then we're going to say .padding, .horizontal, -10. Okay, so let's hit resume and see what that looks like. So right now in our preview, we have the selected option as Japanese. Try again. Why aren't you working? Okay, So it's a little jacked up right now, and that's okay. Oh guys, yeah, I messed up. So we actually don't want the for each loop embedded in a VStack. So go ahead and cut the for each loop out, paste that back in there, and then we're gonna wrap all of this stuff inside of a VStack. Okay, so really quickly guys, make sure you have an H stack, then your for each loop, and then inside the for each loop, your VStacks. That's my bad, sorry. And look, this is looking pretty good, right? We have our little selector there. But you guys will notice now everything looks like it's lower than the Japanese option. Like if I change this to American and resume the preview, you'll notice that American sits higher than everything else because that selector bar isn't available for the other things. So we're just gonna say else, and you're gonna create this capsule again, and you're just gonna give it a fill of a clear color, right? So you guys will notice that if it's a black color, they all have the capsule and it matches the height or the width of the text. And that's just to get everything sort of on the same height, right? But we can just give it a clear color and that actually looks really good. Okay, now guys, we want to make it so that when we click on one of these items, it modifies this selected option property that we have. So it's pretty simple. On our VStack here, just go to the end of those brackets and say on tap gesture, hit enter to open up those brackets, and you're just going to say self.selected option equals item. And that is going to make it so that whenever we click on an item, it updates this selected option property with that selected item. So now what we want to do is drop this menu options list into our content view. So let's go to content view, and let's see, we have this comment here. So we're just gonna now say, what is it? Menu options list, and it's gonna ask us for this selected option. So now we are gonna create a state property up at the top, state private var, selected option. We have to cast it as menu bar options, and then say equals dot Japanese. And then here we can go back and say $ selected option. And the reason we have this as a binding property, guys, is because we're gonna be using this selected option property throughout the rest of this view. But the menu options list also needs to know something about that selected option. We will go more in depth on that concept later on in the video and sort of tie everything together when it makes sense. So the next thing we have to do, guys, is start to build out these sections that we have in our menu. And we also need to build out the data model for those sections. So really quickly, let's go up to the top here. I'm going to create a new file. It's going to be a SwiftUI view, and I'm going to call this menu item section. Okay, so this is going to contain this text here and then a bunch of these items for each sort of category. So Japanese has its own set of food items, American has its own set of food items, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just get started with it. Let's resume our preview just to make sure it's connected. And we're going to create a VStack here. We're going to say text, and let's just say Japanese. And we're going to say font.title.bold. Then we're going to say .padding, .vertical. And then what we need to do next, guys, first off, I want to get my preview showing up. And that should just be pretty simple, right? This VStack, let's modify it a little bit. We're going to have an alignment of .leading, and spacing is going to be 24. Okay, it's not going to do anything currently, but it will later on. The next thing we need to do, guys, is create our data model for this stuff. So basically, we want to be able to like loop through some sort of data set for each category that we have that represents all the food items that we have. So I'm going to just go and create that file for our data model right now. It's going to be called food item, I guess you could call it. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and paste this stuff in here, guys. So we're gonna have a struct. It's gonna be food item. So you guys should just go ahead and type this out now. It's really straightforward. It's just each one is gonna have an ID because we need to conform to the identifiable protocol, a title, a description, a price, and an image name. So that's everything you see here: title, description, price, and an image. And then we're gonna have a bunch of these foods, okay? So for example, we're gonna have these Japanese foods, right? So you guys can either take the time to type this out, or the link for the source code is actually in the description, guys. So if you want to just download this project from GitHub, feel free, and you can have access to all of this stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste the rest of everything in here. So I have American food and Italian food, and I'm just going to update this to food item. Okay, so as you guys can see, this should be pretty straightforward. Japanese is going to have this array of food items. American will have this array of food items. So you guys can see here steak, cheeseburger, and Philly cheesesteak. And then Italian has pizza and pasta, right? And then promotions is just a mix of everything, and so is fancy. There is a little bit of modification we have to do, however, to our menu bar options. So this is where some of this magic comes in. And I'm actually going to type this out with you guys. So on our enum, we are going to create a food items property. And it's going to be an array of food items. And we're going to do a switch on self again. Ooh, I love when Swift does it for you. That's really nice and helpful. So this is just a switch on all of our cases. And you guys might be able to guess what we're going to do. Here, I'm going to return Japanese food. Here, I'm going to return American food. Here, I'm going to return Italian food. And for promotions, I'm just going to return, Japanese food or something plus Italian food. And then fancy, I'll just return Italian food. It doesn't matter. These two don't really matter. But what does matter here is the concept of what we're doing here. So now each case that we have, so for example, our Japanese case, it has a title, which is Japanese, which is what's going to go right here. And then it also now has a list of associated food items. So Japanese is now linked to our Japanese food array of food items that we've created here as sort of our mock data. So that's actually really cool. It's really slick. Now we're going to go back to our menu items section and actually see how to render this out using that data that we just created. So we're going to say for each item, sorry guys, we need to actually populate this item section with an item. So we're going to say let item, and it's going to be equal to a menu bar option, or we could call it option, it doesn't matter. So basically each one of these sections has to be populated with some sort of data, right? So now we can go here and we can just, say option, and we can say .Japanese. Okay, so let's just go ahead and keep building this out, and I'll do a quick run through of everything just in case it's confusing. So now we're going to be able to loop through for each option dot food items, food item in. So open up the brackets, say food item in. We're going to create an H stack. Spacing is going to be 16. Then within that H stack, we're going to have a B stack. Alignment is dot leading, spacing is 8. And really quickly, guys, we notice that we have H stack because we have sort of think of it as this is a box and then this is another box. So these things are horizontally stacked, but then within that H stack, we have this vertically stacked group of items. So that's what we're doing right here. In the B stack, we're creating like sushi, description, and price. So we're going to say text, and we're going to say food item dot title dot font dot title 3 dot bold. Then we're going to say text food item dot description dot font dot caption dot foreground color is dot gray, and then we are going to say text price and do some string interpolation, food item dot price, and you're gonna want to put I think we already have the $ in front of it, so that's fine. And then you're gonna say dot font dot system size 14 dot font weight dot bold. Cool. So let's go ahead and just hit resume to see what we have so far, and just make sure that this is looking okay so far. So that looks pretty good, right? Now on this H stack, guys, just to sort of make sure that everything is shoved over to the right, we're gonna add a spacer. Ooh, that's on the B stack. I want it on the H stack. Yeah, spacer. Okay, and then on this guy, let's see, on the H stack, we're gonna add some padding of dot horizontal. Okay, so now we need to get the images in here. So let's go ahead and do that. So after the spacer, guys, you're gonna say image food item dot image name dot resizable dot scale to fill, and then we're gonna give it a frame of width and height of 96 by 88, and we don't need the alignment. Dot clipped, and dot corner radius is 10. All right, so you guys can see these images showing up really nicely here. If you guys want the images I use for this project, just once again, go ahead and download the source code. The link is in the description, and you will find them in the assets folder. You can just drag and drop those into your project, or you could use your own. Just make sure that you adjust the image names to correctly reflect the images that you want, and make sure the name matches up with what you have in your assets folder for each one of your food items. Okay, so back in our menu item section, we see that this is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and just change the preview provider to like a different option. And you guys will notice that it changes the food items, but it's not changing the title up here. So like I could change it to Italian as well. And you guys will notice that now there's only 2 items, but we need to change this guy. So you see up here, we have it hard coded to Japanese. We want it to say option.title. So you guys will notice that everything is being powered by this enumeration that we have, this menu bar options, right? So this is what we're passing in to create each one of these sections. So this is where it gets the title from, and then this is where it gets all of the associated food items from. So we can see how powerful this enumeration is in helping us create this feature right now. So now what we need to do is go back to our content view and actually drop this guy into our content view here. Something I noticed, guys, is that we want some padding on this menu options list. So let's go ahead and fix that really quickly. So in our menu options list, just go ahead and add some padding, open square bracket, dot top, dot horizontal. So that looks much better. Let's see, or it should look much better. Zoom, come on SwiftUI, help me out here. Okay, so yeah, that looks a lot better. So now what we want to do, guys, is create another scroll view to get this guy dropped in here. So we're going to say scroll view, and this one is going to be vertical. Shows indicators is false as well. We're going to say for each, and then we're going to say menu bar options all cases id / .self, open brackets, item in. Okay, then we're going to create that menu item section, and we just have to pass in that item, or we could call this option, right? And we can instantly see that looks freaking awesome, right? So this is really coming together, guys. Okay, so our padding is a tad bit off, you notice that we have the correct padding on sort of our items, but not this. So what we want to do is actually go back to our menu items section and go down to where we added this horizontal padding. I have it on line 43, and we're actually going to delete that, guys. So that's going to make this look sort of janky, but then if we go back to our content view and just add padding of dot horizontal on the whole for each guy that we're doing, then it's going to give everything the correct horizontal padding. And you guys will notice that that looks pretty darn good. All right, guys, and just to clean this up a little bit more, you guys notice in our completed application, we have this nice divider that sort of lines up with our selector bar here. So let's just go ahead and go to this menu options list, and we're gonna add something called an overlay, and just go ahead and hit enter there. And we're gonna just make it a divider, and it's gonna be dot padding, dot horizontal, and say -16. And then you're gonna do a comma and say alignment dot bottom. And you guys will notice that that adds a nice separation between our header and our menu items down here. So now comes the tricky stuff, guys. We want to introduce this functionality of actually making it so that when we click on one of these items, it scrolls to the correct position in our menu items list or sections. So the first thing we're going to need to do is wrap this scroll view inside of something called a scroll view reader. So go ahead and just cut this out here and say scroll view reader, and you're going to see a view that provides programmatic scrolling by working with a proxy to scroll to known child views. That's exactly what we want, right? So it works with this proxy that's able to read values in the scroll view to scroll to certain children in that scroll view, which is exactly what we want. So like this Italian section is a child in our scroll view. When we click Italian, we want it to scroll to that child. So I'm going to say scroll view reader, brackets, proxy in, and then paste this stuff in there. So you guys will notice that everything looks exactly the same. So now what we want to do is add this on change method. So we're going to go and actually we're going to wrap this for each loop inside of a VStack, guys. And that's just so that this sort of is embedded within a container. And then we're going to, on this VStack, we're going to say dot on change of the selected tab or selected option. And we don't need this new value. We are going to now say proxy dot scroll to selected tab or selected option. I don't know why I keep saying that. Dot top trailing. So hitting resume on the preview, you guys will notice now that we are getting some awesome functionality, right? So anytime I select an option, it is automatically going to the correct position in the scroll view of that particular option. So it's looking pretty good so far. However, we noticed that it's not giving us that nice scrolling animation. So let's do that really quickly, and then I'm going to go through a quick explanation of what exactly this on change of function is doing. So this is super easy. Just go ahead and cut out this line of code with a proxy.scroll to. We're going to say with animation .ease in out, and then paste that back in there. And now we'll notice that if I hit American or anything, that it is actually scrolling to those options very nicely. So that's looking great so far, guys. So just to do a quick recap on this on change of, so basically what this is saying is anytime selected option changes. So when I click it, when I click a new option, selected option is changing, and this on change of function gets called. So then it will then run this piece of code or this block of code with an animation proxy.scroll to that particular selected option. So that's looking great. Okay, couple other things we have to do. So we want to make it so that one, when we scroll vertically and it reaches a section, that it highlights that option in our horizontally scrollable menu. And also, you guys will notice that like if I select promotions and then I go back over to Japanese and I hit it, it scrolls back up to Japanese, but it doesn't scroll the horizontal bar back over to Japanese. So we need to do that as well. So let's go ahead and get started with that now. So to fix the horizontally scrolling problem that we have, guys, it's going to be really similar to the effect we got with this scroll view reader and the proxy that we used for the vertical scroll view. We're going to do the same thing for the horizontal scroll view to fix that problem. So let's go to the menu options list, and in this body here, we're going to just double click on the scroll view bracket and highlight the whole thing. Okay. And then we're just going to cut that out and we're going to wrap it in a scroll view reader, bracket proxy in, and then paste our scroll view back in there. Okay, so on this tap gesture, this is where we're going to use the proxy to scroll to the desired item that we want to go to. So we're just going to say proxy.scroll to item top trailing, and let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. It's going to be close to what we want, but not all the way there just yet. So I can go to Italian and promotions, and you'll see that it's scrolled over to promotions, right? You can see that if I now click Japanese, it scrolls all the way back over to Japanese, but we want more of like an animated effect. Okay, so what we're gonna do is wrap this in an animation block. We're gonna say with animation dot ease in out, and then paste those guys in there. We'll run that again. And this is still not gonna give us exactly what we want. It's a little bit cleaner with that animation, as you can see there, right? So like if I just hide Japanese a bit and go there, it's a little bit cleaner, but not 100% what we want. So this is where the matched geometry effect is going to come in. So we're going to go up to the top here and create this namespace var and call it animation. And then on this capsule where we set the fill to black, we're going to say dot matched geometry effect. Just give it a random ID. It could be any string that you want, and pass in animation. And now if we run this, guys, basically what matched geometry effect does is it just smooths out those animations to make them look more seamless. Okay, so now if I click promotions, we notice that through the matched geometry effect, it looks as if this selector bar is sliding all the way over to my desired item instead of just sort of appearing in one place to the next, right? So that is looking really, really good. And we are getting pretty close to done here, guys. The last thing we need to do is unfortunately the hardest part of this whole thing, but let's go ahead and see if we can get it done. All right, guys, so we need to create a couple new files to accomplish what we want to accomplish here. So we're gonna create one called an offset key, and it's just gonna be a Swift file, and then we're gonna create one called an offset modifier. Okay, so first we're gonna work with this offset key. So we need to import SwiftUI up at the top. We're gonna create a struct called offset key. It's gonna conform to this preference key protocol. We need to give it a default value, which is going to be cgrect equals .0. And then we need to also have this reduce function, and we're gonna say value equals next value. Just go ahead and build that to make sure it's all running. Don't really worry about these two properties, guys. The important thing to note here is this preference key and what it's used for. So essentially, the problem that we're facing right now with our application is we have a view that contains multiple children or multiple subviews, right? So if you break it down, this is one subview, and that view has a bunch of its own unique individual children. And then this scroll view is another child or subview, and and that scroll view has its own set of children. So we have a lot of like sort of nested views here. So essentially our view hierarchy is very complex here. And a problem that occurs with that is how you update data when things change in like a child view, right? So if you have a parent and then you have some distant child, right? Subview, 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 and something happens in that subview, and you want that to take effect back in the parent or maybe back in another child view, you have to pass a lot of data around, and it gets really confusing and it gets hard to manage all of that data, and it makes your code really annoying. So a preference key is sort of a way around that, and it allows you to make a change in a child and have that take effect across the entire sort of landscape of your application or that hierarchy of views. So it's really nice. So let's work with our offset modifier now. So we're going to create offset modifier, view modifier, and we're going to need to pass in an option here, guys, menu bar options, and then we're going to make this function called body. And essentially what this offset modifier is going to do, we're going to place this on our menu item section. So we want to be able to read the offset of the scroll, and based on what that offset is, we are going to want to update our current selected tab. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to use a geometry reader to do that. So we're going to access the content that's associated with this view modifier. In this case, it will be our menu item section. And then we're going to say .overlay, and we're going to add a geometry reader, open bracket, proxy in. And this geometry reader is going to be how we, sort of read the frame environment that we're in. And we're going to use that offset key, guys. So 1 second. So yeah, we're going to just give it a color of .red so you guys can see how this works really quickly. And then we're going to say .preference, and it's going to ask us for a key and a value. So it's going to be offset key .self, and the value is going to be proxy.frame in .named scroll. So I'm going to explain all this, guys. Just type it out with me for now. Then on this overlay, we're going to say on preference change, and we're going to say offset key .self, and then it's going to allow us to perform something and give us access to this proxy from the geometry reader. So I'm just going to say let offset equal proxy.min y, and then I'm going to say print offset. So essentially what's happening here, we're overlaying this geometry reader on each section of our menu item section, right? Or our menu. And every time this preference changes, is essentially every time the user scrolls, this little block of code is going to get called. And it's going to allow us to access the offset of the scroll view. And we're going to be able to use that offset to determine what section we're on so that we can ultimately select that tab up at the top. So let's just go ahead and add this preference change, this offset modifier to our menu item section. So go to menu item section, highlight the overall VStack and say .modifier, offset modifier, and we need to pass in our option. And let's just go ahead and run this, and you guys are just going to see big red blocks over this guy, right? So that's exactly what we want, actually, because this is our view modifier taking effect. We're going to change this to clear. I just wanted you to see how this works, right? So as I scroll, you guys will see that I get a bunch of crazy values here. It's really just giving me the view offset of my scrollable list, right? So basically when I'm at this point, I want it to update my list. When I'm all the way up at the top, I want it to update my list to Japanese. When I get to this second section, I want it to be American, so on and so forth. So let's go out and go over exactly how we're going to do that. So let's go back to our offset modifier, and we're going to create a binding variable here, guys. And it's going to be called current option, and it's going to be a menu bar options. So this is going to differ from the selected option, and we'll see how in a little bit. Let's just go ahead and go here and say with animation, and I'm going to say current tab, and this is a little bit tricky. It's some math involved. Basically, let me just change current option. And change this to option. But you guys are just going to want to go ahead and type this out or copy it from the source code. But essentially this is just math involved in figuring out the offset and updating this current option, which is a binding property that so that when this gets updated, whatever this is bound to will also get updated. So we're going to bind this back to our home or content view. So you guys were to notice if we try to build this, it's going to fail, and that's because we need to pass in a current option in our menu items section. So we're going to create another binding variable here, and it's going to be called current option. And then we're going to go down here in the modifier and say current option, $current option. Let's build that. We don't need this preview anymore. Build again. Okay, so now we're back in the home view, which is where we're actually going to create this current option. So we can copy this, paste it, and just change this to current option. Okay, so how do these differ, right? What's the difference between current option and selected option? Why do we have two? And it's because these two things are going to be used in different contexts. So the selected option is going to get updated when the user taps on an option. The current option is going to get updated when the user scrolls to an option. If you try to use one property for both of those pieces of functionality, it's going to cause problems in the app, and this actually won't function correctly. So that's why we create two different option properties, because we have two different pieces of functionality for selecting an option. So now you guys will notice we have a bug down here. Let's go ahead and fix that. So let's pass this current option into our menu items section, which is current option. So now let's see what else we need to do. So we need to create a coordinate space. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. So on your scroll view, guys, go ahead here and say .coordinate space. And we're going to name it scroll. And let's look and see what this coordinate space does. Just hold down option and click that. It says assigns a name to the view's coordinate space so other code can operate on dimensions like points and sizes relative to the named space. That's exactly what we want, right? Operating on dimensions like points and sizes relative to the named space. So this is named scroll. And then if you guys remember back in our offset key or offset modifier, we created this value in our preference saying that, hey, this preference has a key and it has a value, which is the geometry reader's proxy.frame in this coordinate space scroll. So now these two things are linked together. So we can now perform changes when things happen in this scrollable list based on that namespace or that coordinate space. Okay, one more thing we have to do is make sure that we are selecting something when we scroll to a certain position. So let's go back and go to our menu options list. And I think I already added this off camera. So you guys are going to want to go ahead and, oh no, sorry, wrong thing. Menu options list. Yeah, it's not here. So in menu options list, we're going to add another binding called current option, menu bar options. Okay, and this is once again just helping us keep track of the current versus the selected option. So now right below this on tap gesture code, you guys are gonna go, I believe, is it on this scroll view? Let's just do it right here. We're gonna say on change of current option. Then we're going to say proxy.scroll to current option anchor.top trailing. Build failed. Okay. So essentially, guys, what this is doing is it's saying, okay, when the current option changes, when this current option guy changes, then we want to scroll to the correct option up here. And we also need to change this to current option instead of selected option, and this to current option as well. Okay, so now I believe our build's still going to fail, so let's check out the error. We need to pass in our current option to this menu options list. So now I think we might be good to go. So let's check and see that this still works. Cool. And voila. Look at that. It's working beautifully. Okay, so as promised, guys, it is time to explain that giant mess we just went through, okay? Because it was a lot of information, so I'm going to go back through one more time and just explain everything. And really quickly, just to clean this up, we want some padding up at the top. Just go ahead and give your VStack some padding on the top, rerun the code. And if you guys understand everything just fine, that's going to be it for this video. If you want to stick around for an explanation of what we just did with the offset key, offset modifier, and everything, stick around. Okay, so let's hop back into our offset key. Just a quick recap on this. Preference keys help us manage updates when we have a complex view hierarchy. So you guys notice here we have a lot of children and subviews that exist in our view, like our main view, which is this main screen right here. And a preference key is going to help us have an effect have a change take effect in a child or happen in a child view, and then have that update our overall parent view or something in the parent view. Namely, we scroll here, we update this list here, just like that. Cool. So this offset modifier is going to utilize that offset key. So we're going to place this modifier on each section, okay? And it just has a clear color, that's why we can't see it right now. You guys might remember when we had the red color before. So it's going to place this overlay over the content, and it's going to add this preference to it, right? The preference key is the offset key that we created, and the value is the proxy.frame. So whatever the frame of this guy is the value of this offset key. So now when the preference changes, when the offset key preference changes, okay, mainly anytime we scroll, then this code is going to take effect. So this is just some complex math that is going to update the current option based on the scroll offset. Okay, so don't really worry about this. You can just copy and paste that stuff. Took a lot of fiddling around with to figure out. But then essentially we place this offset modifier on the menu item section, and that looks great. So now that as we're scrolling, this offset modifier is linked to each one of our sections. So when it scrolls, then this on preference change guy will get called based on how we're scrolling through these sections in our menu. Okay, and then the last piece of the puzzle essentially is going to this menu options list, and we have to create this current option guy. And that differs from the selected option because the selected option is something that updates as the user taps something, whereas the current option updates as the user scrolls to something. So then we said, hey, on change of current option, then we scroll to the current option in the horizontally scrollable list, right? So when current option changes in one place, it takes effect everywhere, which is awesome. This is all done, guys. I know it was a little complex, and that last bit of functionality was the hardest bit of it, but it is a super, super cool feature, very engaging for users, and it's something that you can add into any app that was going to have this sort of functionality where you have like a scrollable list of categories of things. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Once again, link to the source code is in the description. Link to more of my courses with SwiftUI is in the description as well. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Peace out.